We talked about how to do these 3 presentations, and they fall into past, present, and future. It's really not fair following Saul. So, but seriously, the premise of this discussion is really quite different. I finished college undergraduate 40 years ago last month, and the story I tell is I have so many friends I still know in the profession, and when we finished school, the graphic designers, got their degree. They all did. I talk to them and see them now 40 years later, and the architects, they're still doing architecture. The product designers, product design. Illustrators, still illustrating. When I talk about our business, I realize that ours has completely changed. And it's not just technology. For some reason in society and culture, we've sort of embraced all of these things. You could say it's under the idea of branding or identity, but regularly we get called up by clients to start with a small branding question, and it explodes from there. So for this demonstration, I'm going to show mostly our work, but I'm going to try to show how broadly it is stretched. Obviously with technology, there's motion and all the new things in mobile technology. But really in the broadest sense, the responsibility is more like a publisher. So very first thing, one of the benefits of studying art history and design history, you get to hear about some great people before you. And one guy who for me is almost every day someone I think about, Alexander Calder, because he lived in a place between play and art and design. He took the longest time before getting serious, and the work reflects this fantastic sort of energy. Drawing sculptures out of things that really don't make sense, and of course the mobiles you would know. So I'll start with the obvious first, technology, but really it's communication. I think we say we're designers, but actually the biggest requirement we have from clients and from ourselves really is the idea of communication. If anything, design as compositional design is being diminished, and the ability to communicate effectively and well and quickly is ever more important. We have some of our staff here, and the first thing that comes up these days really is mobile technology for mobile phones, for tablets, and last of all, really for websites on computers. And it's the beginning of a branding and a communication. It seems like you can't launch any project unless the mobile device is ready, which is kind of something. And it goes across product companies, institutional things. This is actually a sample of an AIJ initiative on ending gun violence. But again, it's mobile device friendly and responsive. So I'm going to go through very quickly a lot of things, kind of the opposite way than Stan did, and start with really little things because I think it's kind of a good place to start. We start with very little relationships in the work we do. These are just folded pieces of paper, which turn into pretty dramatic things by using just little things. Pantone paper, it's probably gone now, but the idea of just working with simple materials, it's just hoops of paper, and it's controlled by the width of the sheet, which was 26 inches. Folding paper just never gets old. This is for the LA Public Library. And the ability to make little things which actually dimensionally represent ideas more than just a photograph or an illustration. And I think the thing that probably never gets old is playing with type. And these are those little letters you see when you walk into a building and it says, "Welcome Bob Smith of the Smith Company." They're just, too good. But it leads us into playing with paper and typography. And this is the beginning of a poster for, I think for your UCLA, which you really can fool around and with light invent something entirely synthetic, entirely creative. And the idea is you have total control. It's made super low tech, so you have tremendous freedom. This is a piece done recently, and I want to show how sloppy the work is, just to show how it doesn't really matter. This is done really fast with a hot glue gun, and it's really messy. You can look in close and see. It's just, the only rule was the paper was 4 inches tall, and it's glued really quick. See, super messy. I'm just saying, but when you light it, but if you light it properly, and it's better on my screen than yours, it's pretty amazing. So it's pretty fun to work in those really low-tech ways. This is a couple years earlier for the Emerge conference. It was the work of 12 schools, 12 design programs, 12 schools. And the idea for me was was called Emerge. And I first thought of Alien, where the thing is pushed out of the guy's chest. And these 12, well, students from 12 schools entering the industry all at one time in one June. So this pushing out was kind of the concept. These first ideas didn't really work. This was a sketch to make a vacuum form, which kind of failed. But it led us to playing with CNC, which seemed much more natural, and it evoked the idea. And then when that was working, we thought, let's make all the type dimensional, so get some steel punches and punch everything out. This is really hard to fix typos. You can probably imagine. Just saying. But after you make it, then it's still a color question. So since it's all synthetic, we just had a red light, and this industrial thing seemed good for a couple hours, and then it got really bright, and we finally settled on this one, and it was distributed, all over the place. There it is. The whole playing with type just never gets old. This is when George Bush was president. There were just so many things. It was just where to start. So, and that's even meant to be political. Just creatively, it was just a gigantic Pandora's box. So this was the idea of a series of things that, had he had campaign flags and initiatives, I took a lot of little quotes he said, and there was just like too much to do and too little time. But from the paper, though, we sort of over the years have gotten more industrial and played with metal, with tin foil, and then increasingly with metal. This is the first poster just using rolled stuff from Home Depot, which has a nice quality to it. And then for a theater company, getting sheet metal and those stamps that teach kids how to read, and dipping them in house paint and stamping them, so you have the most primitive of typesetting mechanisms. It was for a set of theater companies from urban areas coming to Los Angeles, and so very dangerously these sheets of sharp metal come together and like the theater companies. But that led us to doing serious real work, like with clients and stuff. So this is just the idea of taking it into what you would call signing or environmental graphics, and it's just folded stainless, really simple. And then with MTV, they wanted it less simple, so you got to do the same thing and kind of fool around. This is 4 floors in a regular, boring building with existing architecture, and trying to embellish each sort of landing with some special, silly thing. One was Nickelodeon, one was VH1, one was, so on. So. And then that led to even more serious work. This is the floors of Warner Music Group, and each of some floors were common and some were separate. EA had their own floor, so it was great fun. Again, sheet metal, some fun color. Let's see where this goes. Type in 3D. So it is worth saying, though, that you see things in life every day that are pretty interesting. These all license plates just, again, never get old. Signing in general, the same thing with your introduction about road signs, are just too much good stuff. The typography, you can't really think of stuff this good. But we can totally steal it, and this is for a poster so you recognize the top is from the other project, and this is from the license plate. But it's just such rich material that is sort of nicely not normal. This was one of the floors of Warner Brothers where it's multi-tenants. They all had different colors, so the trick was make them out of white and just wash them with color, and then it was all, they play together. The other thing is that you get sometimes what seem like really tight constraints. This is a high school that had a specific Gaudi catalog typeface. So the upper left one is really normal dimensional type. And the studies are all how to round it or shape it or chisel it. So there's still some creativity involved. So this goes into like the masters to make bronze letters, and they carve all the letters prismatically. And those ultimately turn into really beautiful, really timeless bronze cast letters. People still do this. It's really quite cool. And then it goes into the ground as well. So this is putting stainless type in the pavement, which you probably saw that when you're younger in big banks or in government offices or post offices. It's just terrific, and it's not that difficult. So it leads into things like this, where it's this terrazzo. And then onto a project kind of thing. This is a project not far from here, next to the big Home Depot in Jefferson. It's that giant post office that's been there most of our lives. To develop it, the owner had to really put a lot of trees in because of all the parking. So once they had to buy 500 trees, the name became the Reserve. And so with that, we developed all the marketing stuff, which is the marketing literature. And then the site has been being developed. And if you've seen it recently, these corners are all being developed. It's not quite finished, but it's big stainless blades like the sign you just saw. And our process is to make them always actual size in foam core. This is in the office. And then going out there and holding it up and letting the client drive by and see how it looks. And it's still not finished, but it's getting closer. It's now all silver and the landscaping is finished, but it's kind of interesting. This is maybe getting really further away from what you would call graphic design. This is the Water Garden in Santa Monica, 26 in Colorado. This fountain is 80 feet across, and we may have convinced them to take this new trademark idea and make those little blocks, things you can walk on, out of 4 foot by 4 foot by 2 foot stone, which means it would be like this. Those are people, the little in the back. And so it's the trademark seen from the buildings, but these are big blocks, like the size of sort of this big. So it's more of an insurance question now. You might imagine. This one is very interesting. This is something we don't get to do very often. It's very precise, and it's a lot of constraint, which I kind of enjoy. The smaller of the Spruce Goose buildings for the Howard Hughes used was taken over as the West Coast U2 headquarters. The brief was quite precise, though. Everything you did had to fit the time period 1948, which meant aluminum, the typefaces that were made in the years leading up to then, the fastenings, everything had to be true to what he would have done in the building. So it's rolled aluminum, those are real, pressure fasteners, raised type, and it's a message panel. So when you rent one of those studios, they fill in who has for the hour, and they slide it in, and they change it every day. So this is still being completed, so that's all I have to show on this one. Bas-relief, I better speed up here a little bit. Bas-relief, Eric Gill was an early, we know Gill sans typeface, but he was a great bas-relief sculptor. Huge inspiration both in wood and in stone. This led us to this idea for Warner Brothers to do, instead of doing a big photo thing, do something dimensional. They said, this is nice, keep going. So we kept going, made a little more sketch, and then they said, okay, do it actual size, 12 feet by 12 feet. So the truck is there for scale. The panels are 4 by 6 feet, and the 6 pieces go together. And when you put it together, you get this. So what it is ultimately cast in fiberglass, but it's real bronze patina put onto the surface. And that's the finished deal. It's the entrance to the VIP tour if ever you're stuck with relatives out of town doing it. You'll see it. Most recently, and this is very interesting, Barry Myers, the retiring CEO of Time Warner, wanted on his clock to get the War Memorial updated. They have a very famous one that goes through World War II, and they wanted to go from the Korean War through, sadly, 6 skirmishes up to Afghanistan. So we got the brief to do this, and before he retired, we had to hurry up and do it. So this is the process. We did this little sketch of this combination of a stage and a flag. I know it sounds really corny, but a lot of client input. But we did then started with actual size lasers of how this could look, and then dimensional studies, foam core, and then went to the bronze foundry and started testing, making this work in bronze, and then putting the pieces together. It's 1,200 pounds. And then they had last year on Veterans Day, the dedication. And there's the piece. It's not normal stuff, but it's wonderful. These crafts still exist. One of the biggest foundries in the country is in Vernon, and they still do this stuff just as good as ever. I'll have to speed up a little more. Coin Design Workshop. UCLA, we do a class at our studio on coin design, and you're thinking, how many jobs are there in coin design? But that wasn't it. It was a chance to take typography and dimensional sculpture into one class. And so that's the thing. So the idea here was the wood on the right is what you might carve. The easiest casting is urethane, and then the more complex one is casting aluminum, but they're all doable. So here's the class in our studio, one of our workshops. And they had 4 days, so a day of carving the master, designing it and carving it step by step, then making the flexible mold, and ultimately casting them. And it went amazingly well. We only had a few disasters. I mean, disasters with molding is really messy. But anyway, but they all made these flexible molds so they could cast as many as they wanted after the class in any material, pretty much. But they actually mostly chose to use urethane. So it's a coin 8 times up, so it's 8 inches by 8 inches, as though it were like a $50. And the aesthetics were completely open, so some did, well, you'll see, fairly decorative, sort of illustrative. This was the constellation of planets done very precisely by someone who was in astronomy. And then a much more religious theme. 3D forms. So getting further now from the original conversation into like architecture and objects, we're getting a little bit further away from graphic design as we think of it. This is a series of objects for, again, for Warner Brothers, creating sculptural pieces. This is seeing the process in the factory with MDF on a steel frame, and then stone and bronze in the field. And to their credit, the client really knew that we were not designers of 3D things. They accepted graphic designers could take their vision and their brand and take it into this dimension. I don't think we're special. I think really there's an openness to graphic designers doing this, seriously. So MTV, that big red boat it's not red anymore, but the boat really is a cover for all the air conditioning ducts. So the best part was it's huge, and the cities let it get really big because it was not a sign, it was a boat. And there's no restrictions on boats. This is true. You can't make this up. So the type, they wanted something really primitive. Of course, management's changed, now it's Viacom, but then they wanted something really like Fred Flintstone meets the Jetsons kind of thing. And it was hard to do because they wanted it really ragged. And try to make welders do this unless they're drinking. They all wanted to tidy it up, so it was really a struggle to get it messier and messy. But this is what it was, and now it's, of course, in the closet. This is a funny little thing. This, on the very far right panel, a bronze diamond-shaped trademark goes in. The client had lots of money, and it's a very big open space, kind of a movement from the freeway into land, quite a long drive. And they wanted these big planes. These are 10 by 12 foot solid granite. And the trademark is sort of fluttering and then slowly flattens as you get closer to it. It makes no sense now, but at the time it seemed really cool. But it's beautifully made. It's amazing that there are people that are still carving this kind of stuff. It's not clad, it's literally solid. There's no concrete, solid stone. One of the things we've done in recent years, for no particular reason, we built a glass studio. And I say that meaning we do serious assignments for clients. The glass studio is intentionally to go fool around, and it's really important to have things you do that don't have a goal and don't need a concept. So this stuff is clearly for fooling around. We really don't like to get real projects because it ruins it. So this is a studio. We have two studios, but this one is strictly for glass, and the idea is you can just do stuff for no particular reason. These are textures and colors, and it's really more research. In fact, most of the stuff we've done here turns into a photograph which becomes a cover of something, but not really the object. But this is a good example, an AIGA poster. It's a small piece of glass tied with copper wire, fired so it pulls the waste in. There's black and white lasers under it, and so when you put it together, you get the poster. And it's only this big. I mean, it's sort of, the magic is that it's the wrong size. Well, the idea was they wanted to have something you couldn't tell what it was. It was the art done by designers. Like, what would that be? Anyway, the other thing is when you pull the glass and play around with it, you get this kind of taffy-like stuff. So this is a series of just stringers, just pulling glass like taffy, and it's very flexible, like live fishing line. And then you play with texture. This is, fooling around with curved foam core, fireproof foam core. They make that, and get this. And color. That's just like better than fooling in Photoshop. There's limitless palette for this, and laying stringers into solids. Casting, I can go on all night here. But we did a series called Glass Books. Some of these have gone to Germany, and they're awards for national book publishers, and they inscribe the name of the store and send it around, sort of as a series. And then this I can't even explain. It's drop ring. We're looking for a use. We have a lot of them, too, but I don't know what to do with it. And then if you take window glass, which is tempered glass, it has a fair amount of lead in it, so it turns into this jade color. So it's hard to work with because it's very tough, but it gives you this incredible glow of it jade. Occasionally we do real projects. These are a series of sconces for a medical clinic. The dress for your work, So here they are. It's 18 pieces. It's a 3, 4, 5 grid. We rotate the elements, and you get siblings, not the same. And there's the finished sconce. And then last suite of this thing is bigger stuff. This is a product line, a new lounge seating line that launched in Paris in January. A new name, new color, whole thing. This is the mini book. This is the mobile device, of course, and all the stuff that goes with that, which leads into the showroom. This is the launch in Chicago, and it's then the graphics throughout the space. And again, graphics and dimension. We don't do the physical walls, but then all the graphics and communication materials and all the marketing support that comes into it. So it's a bit of 3D, 2D, and whatever web is. In the last discussion, we were approached by our bank 9 years ago now to buy a building. We couldn't find one. They said, okay, build a building. We're like, how do you do that? And they said, here's the equation. So we, it sounds really crazy, but they said, here's what you do. So I thought, I can do this, no problem. So I designed these buildings, and then it kind of went no place. So we hired an architect. She was like, these are so stupid, but I'll help. So but the one thing we did do, but the one thing we liked was the idea on the front of this, there's a kind of a tile implied, the idea of making a tile. So we made this great deal with the devil. The architect would do a great job, and she did a brilliant job of the wireframe of the building. But we would do all the surfaces. And I can't believe she went for it, because it's really risky, because it could ruin the building, but it's still. So here's our study of doing tiles. And then these are the size of a letterhead, but they're different waves meant not to line up. And then when you make them actual size, they look like this. And then you finish them, and then you cast them. That's Tom. I see him somewhere. These are the pieces, so it's 83 parts to make the building. And you start putting them on. Here you go, Tom. I knew you were young. Was you, though? So you put them together, you get this kind of effect. And once you do the outside really custom, then the inside happens. So the ladies all wanted great bathrooms, so really custom sink stuff. So foam core models again, and then you get this fall away French drain with all that stuff. And then the workshops had to be really cool. So again, you model them, and then you get the workshop. And then the overall look of the office, you put it together. This is sort of when it was first completed, but it's best at night. Thank you.